On this week's episode of Lewis on the Law, I've got another great show for you. We're going to talk about heirs property. I have attorneys Joann Johnston and attorney Gentry Mander from the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center here with me, and we're about to really get you guys informed. So stay tuned. We'll be back with you in just a minute.
Welcome to Lewis on the Law.
You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week and every week with legal information designed to empower you, the listener. And I've got another great show for you guys this week. We're talking heirs property today, and I have attorney Joann Johnston and attorney Gentry Mander from the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center, and we're about to get you guys informed. So, you know what? Why don't you guys just introduce yourself real quickly? Tell our audience a little something about yourself. You know, nothing shocking, but something someone might not know. No, that's a curveball. Just go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm going to do it. My name is Joann Johnston. I'm the Legal Programs Director for the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center.
And I'm Gentry Mander. I'm the Equal Justice Works Georgia Housing Corps Legal Fellow.
Nice. That was a really long title there.
Very long.
Okay, so let's get into this a little bit. What is the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center?
So the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center is a nonprofit law firm. It's the only of its kind in Georgia. We help folks who have inherited property, whether they received it through a will or because someone died without a will, but it results in multiple families owning a piece of property together. We call it tangled title. And so we work with low and moderate income folks throughout the state, but mostly in Atlanta, the Atlanta area, and in South and Southwest Georgia. Clear title to those properties that they own with multiple family members. We kind of work in three buckets. Bucket one is direct legal services and title clearing, whether it's helping a family negotiate agreements among themselves, probating a will or probating an estate, filing a quiet title action or some sort of other litigation, just whatever's necessary to help that family achieve their goal for the property. It could be that one family member owns the property or multiple family members own the property or it's put into some sort of entity. Second bucket is estate planning and heirs property prevention. Only 35% of folks in America have last wills and testaments. And so getting people to understand that you need a will, but also that you need to be thoughtful about the will that you're going to get because, as I'm sure we'll discuss in minute detail, it's all well and good to have a will, but if your will leaves everything to your 5 children equally, the property, so the land or the house, you're going to have problems. Well, you're not going to have problems. After you've passed away, your family is going to have problems. And the third bucket is asset education about how to own a home, own land, make it, maximize the value, make it generate wealth for you and your family. So we have 6 attorneys, a social worker, and 2 community advocates. We have offices in Atlanta, Athens, Macon, and Fitzgerald, Georgia. And so, did I forget anything? Gentry says no.
Well, that's definitely a lot. So what is heirs property? It's entangled property?
So heirs property is property that's been passed down generation to generation, and it's owned by more than one person. So that can happen if you have a will that leaves your real property to more than one person, or if you pass away without a will, and your property would go according to the Georgia Code, which means in most cases your spouse and children, but in some cases your siblings or nieces and nephews can be in that as well.
Well, it passes by Georgia Code, so what's the problem? There's a code that takes care of this, right?
Yep, the code, it typically winds up with more than one person unless you just had a single spouse and no children, or no spouse and one child. You're looking at multiple people, and once multiple people own it, then that's where things get tricky.
What, they don't get along? You mean family members who don't get along? Is that even such a thing?
Yeah, I would say when I come across a family where everybody gets along, they're definitely the anomaly.
Okay, sounds good. So what do you guys do to take care of this? What are the first steps?
So the first step is understanding what the family's options are and understanding who the co-owners are. You can have properties that came into families in the late 1800s, right? And lack of.
Did you look at me when you said that?
I did a little. James's family is an example of this. Comes into the family in the late 1800s, especially in rural places. There wasn't a lot of estate planning that was done. So you have generation after generation after generation of family members passing away. So, a case I'm working on right now has 41 co-owners on the property. But as
Yikes,
the
that's
problem
a lot.
compounds over time, right? And the number of people involved increase over time. It's never going to become fewer people. It's only going to become more. And so that's why it's important when someone passes away and they own land or a house that the family members take steps as soon as possible to go ahead and do what they need to do to what we call clear title. So, but the first step is understanding who the co-owners are. Sometimes it's people that, the client might never have met in their lives. They might live in Washington. That person in Washington doesn't even know they own the property. And so that's the first step, is doing the family research. And then, working with the client and then the family, once they've been identified, to understand what the family's options are and to help them reach a consensus about what should be done.
Wow, that sounds like quite a pickle. How widespread is this problem? Is it just the South?
No, so it's widespread throughout the state. Throughout the country. It's a problem that affects, people from every income level. I think, that it's definitely a big problem in the state. The Forestry Commission, or the USDA Forest Services, and the Carl Vinson Institute at UGA did a study recently, it was last year, and they studied 10 non-metro Atlanta counties. So there was Macon-Bibb County was one of them, but that was kind of the biggest, size-wise county. Studied those 10 non-metro counties and found that, make sure I got my numbers right, 11 to 25% of property in those counties was heirs property.
11 to 25%? That's a huge number.
Yeah, so just those 10 counties, the estimated tax appraised value of those properties was over $2 billion.
Wow, that's a lot of money lying out there.
And so we have 159 counties in Georgia. So you multiply that out, and you're looking at a vast amount of wealth that's been locked and is basically in a glass box. It's money in a glass box for billions of dollars in property, where people are going to have to come together and figure out a way to fix it so that they can access that capital.
Yeah. So how does this happen? Why do people not go ahead and get their title cleared?
Well, I think some people don't know that they need to. There's myths surrounding how property passes in Georgia, and people just think that it automatically becomes theirs and they don't need to do anything. There's a impression that people have that you don't need to probate if people didn't have much. And so maybe it's a home that's not worth a ton of money to them, and so they don't think it needs to be probated. Other times it's just sentimental reasons. People just feel uncomfortable removing loved ones from their deeds.
Yeah, it's hard to talk. It's hard to deal with death, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's sad. I mean, I'm an attorney and I write wills for other people. I don't even have a will myself. I know, right? And I'm not getting any younger.
Yeah. So people have all sorts of reasons. Others is they know their siblings aren't going to be cooperative, so they just don't even want to get started in the process, or they don't know who to turn to or what it will cost. I think there's people think that attorneys are always expensive, and so they just don't even reach out.
Wow, that's quite a pickle there. So I said pickle twice in this sentence. That's crazy. So people aren't reaching out. What other blocks are there to people going ahead and clearing title?
The time that has passed. So the more people that have passed away, the more difficult it gets, and it just at some point it just gets kind of overwhelming. And people don't know where to turn. They might go to the probate court and say, I need to probate this person's will. And the probate court says, that's fine, but 5 of that person's heirs have died, so you need to open an estate for them too. And they say, what does that mean? And they walk away and they never try again.
Yeah, it's a lot of work and it can be very convoluted. Okay, so we're reaching the end of this segment. Why don't you guys tell us a little bit of information on how people can get in touch with the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center?
Okay. So,
And you guys too.
so we have a main intake line. So if folks have heirs property or heirs property questions, it's 706-424-7557, and the intake line is extension 1.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I'm your host this week and every week. And on this show, we give you legal information to help empower you, to help you on your journey on a legal issue. This show is not designed to replace the advice of an attorney. If you have a serious legal issue, you need to go ahead and contract with an attorney. You can always contact me on my webpage at jameslewislegal.com. And if I can't help you with your issue, I can direct you to an attorney who can. If you have a topic that you'd like to hear on this show, go ahead and email me. Go ahead and contact me on my contact page. You can email me at james@jameslewislegal or give me a call at 404-601-0075. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. We'll be right back after these messages. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week and every week. I've got another great and exciting and fun show. Who thought that the law could be fun? I mean, it's just awesome. We get to talk about the law, we get to inform you, the listener, and we get to have a little bit of fun here on air. Anyways, I am on the show with attorney Joann Johnston. They're looking at me like I'm crazy. Attorney Gentry Mander, and they're from the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center. Hi, guys. How you doing?
Great.
Okay, so once again, give them some contact information for the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center. I'm going to ask you to do this several times because people miss segments and they can't rewind while they're in the car. So
the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center, if you have questions or need help with your own family's property, we have an intake line. It's 706-424-7557, and the intake line is extension 1. I didn't mention last time, but we do have a website. It's www.ga Heirs, spelled HEIRS, property.org. So www.gaeirsproperty.org.
yeah, that can be really confusing. I think the very first time I ever heard the term, I was in a lecture in law school, and they had a visiting attorney come in, Shanta Davis. I don't know if you guys know her. But she kept saying heirs property, and I'm just like, and I was thinking heir, like the heir, and I'm like, what is that? It's so weird. And then when she started talking about the issue, I realized that it affected me, and I became extremely interested at that point in time. So, okay, you guys are talking about tangled title and a whole bunch of people. Who owns the property? How do you guys determine this?
So it depends in large part on the client. We ask the client before we'll even start working on the case to help us research to research their family tree, right? The first thing you have to know is what property do we own and who owns it. For some families, it's easier than others. Some families only, the original owner is the only person who's passed away. So we're looking at, well, what are your siblings' names? For some folks, it's generations on generations of folks going back to, 100 plus years or more. And that requires some deep diving, a lot of Ancestry.com and other heritage websites and research databases for those clients to take the first step in trying to, research their family and identify who the heirs are. Because if you don't know what you own or what you think you own and who you think owns it.
Now, how do they own this? I mean, say you've got 10 acres and you got 10 people. Do they go and cut up this is my 1/10 or whatever? I mean, how is this owned?
So everybody who owns it has full and equal, they have an undivided interest in the whole.
Oh.
So that means that
that's a mouthful right there.
So undivided interest in the whole. So if my husband and I own a home together, 50-50, that doesn't mean I own the front half and he owns the back half. We own 50% of the entire thing. We both have the right to live and possess the property. We're both responsible for the taxes and property maintenance.
Well, wait a minute. That's interesting. So everyone is responsible for the taxes. What if like there are 10 people who all have claim to that land, but only one person lives there? Everyone's responsible for the taxes?
Everybody's responsible for their pro rata share of the taxes.
Wow, that doesn't seem fair.
Well, they also have the opportunity to receive the benefit from the property if it's ever sold. So just because they're not living there doesn't mean that they're never going to see the fruits of that property.
Yeah, so then if they're paying taxes, they can go ahead and sell their share? Is that true?
Any of the owners can sell their interest in the property.
Okay, that seems like that could get really tangled. Now, how do they do that without good title?
So they can each heir or co-owner can sell his or her share of the property. So if I own a third, the three of us own it together. Yay. I can sell my third to another family member. I can sell my third to a person y'all have never met and don't know about. I can sell my third. I can't divide the property up, right? So when I'm selling my third, I'm selling my 1/3 undivided interest in the whole property. But I, by myself, don't have the legal ability to sell the entire property, but I can sell my 1/3, and then, that person, sometimes a stranger, will now co-own it with the remaining family members.
So typically this would happen though so maybe the title isn't consolidated, so it's owned by multiple people, but at least their names are somewhere in the property record saying that they have something to even sell. So you'd be kind of, it'd be a little reckless to go buy property from somebody who co-owns a piece of property, but they don't actually have their name on anything that's proving they have an interest in it.
Okay, that sounds like that could become problematic at some point in time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what other kind of problems can this cause for owners of heirs property?
When multiple people own a property, either whether it's in their names or it's still in a deceased person's name, you can't sell or mortgage the property without everybody's agreement. You are likely not eligible for loss mitigation programs if you're faced with foreclosure.
Wait a minute, loss mitigation programs when you're faced with foreclosure. What does that mean? Let's break this down in layman's terms so simple guys like me can understand that.
So there's programs that legal organizations offer to help you negotiate with mortgage companies to find a resolution if you haven't been making those payments. But oftentimes they require that you have title to the property or that it be your primary residence. So if your sibling is living in the home and you have your own home, but you also own the home your sibling's living in and the sibling's not paying the mortgage payments, you likely can't get assistance because it's not your primary residence. And and then if your name's not on the title, you're not going to be able, the mortgage company's not going to negotiate with you.
This feels like almost like a can of worms or a ball of string that you're slowly starting to unravel here. So do families argue at this point? Is there a lot of argument or in-battling in families when you come into this situation?
I'd say all the time, 99% of the time, families are.
Well, what are they arguing about? I mean, come on, guys, let's go ahead and get this thing cleared up,
Well, people argue, like I mentioned earlier, there's people have all sorts of motivations. Some people are motivated by greed, so they want the money out of the property. Some people are just really sentimental, and they argue because they want to protect their family heritage. It's something that their ancestors or their parents worked really hard to acquire and maintain. And so they feel very strongly that it should stay in the family and it should be protected. So there's many reasons why people might want to be,
Okay, so you're sentimental, you love the land, or your grandma owned it, you don't want to lose her, like her old jewelry box with the little dancing girl that makes the little music, you know what I'm talking about. So what does the heirs property prevent you from doing? I mean, what's the big deal?
So I mentioned a couple of them. But so a few more things that you are likely excluded from is FEMA assistance in the case of a natural disaster.
Oh
There-
my! So wait a minute. So if it's heirs property, your family's owned it since the 1800s, you're not going to get FEMA assistance. I think that's important to know.
Maybe not. They typically want to see that it's owner occupied. So it's occupied by the owner, not an owner. And in many cases, these families don't even have the documentation to show that they are an owner. And so showing that they are the owner is even more unlikely.
Okay, so wait a minute. What's the distinction in here between an owner and the owner? If you're an owner, you can't get assistance from FEMA. Is that correct? But if you're the owner, you can?
So FEMA's a little difficult.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. This is a really good question here.
So FEMA assistance, same with, there's a lot of great rehab programs going on in Atlanta right now that people are trying to qualify for, and there's other government programs. They look to the owner occupier. So the usual requirement is you have to be an owner occupier. So you have to, usually be the owner if I go down to the courthouse, I'm going to see your name on the deed, the last deed at the courthouse, and you're going to live there. Heirs property, when you have, multiple people owning it, there are some owners who usually do not occupy the house or the land. And so I think, what Gentry was trying to explain is, the owner is, one person or spouse or spouses that are living in the house. But, an owner is when you have multiple co-owners, some who are not living in the household and on the land. And so you have some people who are owner occupiers, and you have some people who are not. And so, even the folks that are in the property, when there's a natural disaster or a rehab program or something like that, have to have paperwork, right? You have to be able to present, FEMA or, the rehab programs or the USDA with a piece of paper that shows that you own the property or that you control the property. So most, especially when there's a natural disaster, it's not easy to prove that you own that. And then, the courthouse might not even be open for you to run down and get the records, much less have them in your home. So.
This is important stuff. This is actually the kind of stuff that I actually want to bring to my listeners. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. Why don't you real quickly give them some contact information for the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center?
So you can reach us at 706-424-7557, extension 1. And our website is www.gaersproperty.org.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. When we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other things heirs property can prevent you from doing, and we're also going to get into prevention. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis. I'm your host, and we'll be back in a minute. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week and every week. And what we try to do here is we try and give you your first step in any legal process, in any legal issue that you might be experiencing. We might not be able to help you all the way through the process, but we can give you an idea of what to look for, what kind of issues you're facing, what kind of things you might want to protect. Now, I've got a really powerful show here going on. We're talking about heirs property, and I'm here with attorney Joann Johnston and attorney Gentry Mander from the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center, and we are getting into the issue of heirs property. Now, real quickly, before we get into some of the things that owning heirs property can prevent you from doing, why don't you guys give them some contact information for you?
So the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center, our phone number is 706-424-7557, and the intake line where you call for help is extension 1. And our website is www.gaersproperty.org.
Okay, so when we last left off, we were talking about some of the things that owning heirs property or not having good title to property can prevent you from doing. What other types of things are there?
So there's actually a lot of things. So you can't sell the property unless everyone agrees, or you file a lawsuit that takes a long time and can be very expensive. You can't use the property unless everyone agrees, and love to see the family that agrees to get a mortgage together.
Right.
So, you can't get a loan that's secured by the property, so you can't get a mortgage unless everyone agrees and signs, and I can't wait till I meet that family. I don't think they exist. You cannot get a line of credit secured by the property, so if you want to take out a loan to start a small business or to send, help send your child to college, you can't use that property to do that. You technically can't lease the property. If it's land, and you're not farming it, but it's farmable and you want to lease it out, there are some people who will lease the property, but you're not going to get maximum value that you could get if you had clear title. You can sell natural resources, right? A lot of people, especially in South Georgia, have timber. There are some companies that will cut your timber and sell your timber for you, but you are not going to get the best price, and they are not the companies that you want to work with. They're taking advantage of your family situation to pay the lowest price possible. And you also can't pass. Because you're not the sole owner, you can't pass the entire property onto your children unless you take steps to make it your property.
Wow. So really what you're talking about when you really get into it is locked up wealth. I mean, you're talking about resources that people just can't access.
It's cash in a glass box where you can see it, you've loved to access it, but you can't because the title is held by multiple family members and it's tangled. And so you can't, break into that box without taking legal action.
What a mess. So what can we do to prevent this?
So, one of the things that you can do to prevent it, or the primary thing that you can do to prevent it, is thoughtful estate planning, right? It's easy to say, okay, well, I have 4 kids, I have a house, I'm going to leave my house to my 4 kids. They get along now, they're perfect angels. I know that's how they're going to be when I pass.
What, is that not a good idea?
No. So your children, God bless them, will likely not be perfect angels. People are grieving, right? They've lost someone who's important to them. They're grieving. People react to grief differently, right? Some people, unfortunately, some people can get very emotional and just start taking actions, based sometimes just on spite, right? Because mama and daddy aren't there to keep everybody in line. And so it's really thinking through your estate plan. We encourage folks to leave property to one person. That's difficult, especially for lower income folks whose main and sometimes only real asset that they can pass along is a home, right? And you don't want to feel like you're disinheriting someone. But we encourage folks to actually talk, especially if it's their children who will receive. Ask the kids, like, do y'all want this house? If y'all don't, is there one of you who wants the house and I can leave it to that person? If none of you want the house, in my will, I can say that the property should be sold and everyone should divide up the money. There's different things that you can do, but it's thoughtful estate planning.
Okay, thoughtful estate planning.
Yes.
So, if you're just leaving this to one kid, like you said, there are low income families. Are there any solutions to that in estate planning?
To leaving it just to one?
Yeah, if you're just leaving it to one kid, you're leaving the other 3 kids out.
Maybe you have something in a checking account. Maybe you have a vehicle that you could pass to another child. Maybe you have a life insurance policy that you could leave to another child. So take a look at what you have and see if you can somehow divvy up everything you have instead of just taking each asset and dividing it equally.
Okay.
Or you can sell, if some people are more willing to do this than others, especially depending on how long they've owned the property. You can tell your executor, this isn't, especially if it's just a property that you downsize into a smaller home, right? It's not a property that's been in your family for generations, right? You can tell the executor to sell the property and split up the money equally, and that way everyone gets something, right? But it's harder when you want the family to keep the property, or that the family, at least some of the children or family members, will want to keep the property.
Okay, so are there other ways to resolve heirs property?
To resolve it?
Yep.
Okay. So Estate planning is about preventing heirs property. Resolving heirs property is difficult because every family is different, right? It usually depends on how long the property's been in the family. Has it passed from generation to generation? Or are we talking about, mama passed away and there's 4 kids that co-own it together, right? Sometimes it just depends on, the number of heirs and the situation, but sometimes you can solve it by through the probate courts, which means you go to the probate court and you ask the probate court to open an estate for your deceased relative and administer it. So just deal with, collect the assets, pay creditors, whatever's left, you either distribute to whoever should receive the property. We always say one person, or sell the property and distribute those assets. Distribute those funds.
Is it ever a good idea? Do trusts ever enter into this equation?
So yes. So trusts are a little bit complicated. But it can be both an estate planning tool and a way to resolve heirs property. But creating a family trust to hold the property, you have to have a trustee, right, that you trust for the trust. And you identify the beneficiaries, and then the trustee is the person who's in charge of the property. And to the extent income is generated, or to the extent that the kind of rules of the road that you set out are met, you can distribute the assets. Another thing that we actually more frequently do than a trust is called a limited liability company, because they're very easy to set up. And it's basically a company that's going to own the property. So everyone conveys or deeds their interest in the property to the company. So the company is the one that owns the property, and then the former owners own the company. So if the 3 of us had a piece of property, we would each sign a deed saying, the James Joann Gentry Limited Liability Company is the new owner of this property. And then we each own a third of the company, right? And so the LLC is a legal entity that can get a mortgage, right? It can get homeowners insurance, it can pay taxes, it can do all the things a person can do. But when an heir or co-owner passes away, their interest or their ownership of the company is what is passed to the next generation, not their interest in the property itself. So the company continues to own the property, but you can have different owners coming in and out.
Okay,
that makes sense.
It does make sense, but I want to kind of get into that a little bit. Are there benefits or negatives to either a trust or an LLC? I mean, can we weigh that out a little bit?
There will be some likely, they're treated a little differently in terms of taxes. So a trust is going to need.
Oh, we're talking taxes.
Yeah.
Oh my.
And so I don't want to go too far down this road.
Yeah, like, oh no.
But I would say that some of the cons potentially would be how it's treated in terms of taxes. So a trust needs its own tax return. And LLCs, it's a pass through, so the owners are taxed on their own personal income taxes. So that can be a pro or a con. But also, I think if you were applying for a rehab program, I don't think they're looking for properties owned by an LLC typically. So
are they looking for properties owned by a trust?
Probably not.
Okay.
They're looking
Some of them will. It
will.
depends on the rehab program. It depends on who is funding the program and what they require. There are some programs, some of the Atlanta programs specifically, that will consider a property that's in a trust. And you can also get a homestead exemption. Each county is different in how they handle homestead exemptions, but you can get a homestead exemption, which is kind of a exception that under certain circumstances that can lower your property tax burden. And so a trust can get a homestead exemption, but an LLC cannot.
Okay, we're reaching the end of this segment. So once again, why don't you guys give them some contact information for the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center?
Yeah. So y'all can reach us at 706-424-7557. And if you need help, the intake hotline or number is extension 1, and you just leave a message and get back to you in 1 to 2 days. The website is www.gaeirs, HEIRS, property.org.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and we have a great show going for you guys this week. We're talking heirs property. I have attorney Joann Johnston and attorney Gentry Mander from the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center. And when we get back, we're going to kind of go through this, what we've talked about already in a nutshell, and we're going to get into a little bit more about the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week and every week on Lewis on the Law. Lewis on the Law is meant to be a first step in your legal problem. If you have a legal issue or a legal problem, you can listen to this show and kind of get a direction. This show is only legal information. This show is not legal advice, and it's not meant to replace the advice of an attorney. If you have a very serious legal issue, you need to go ahead and contract with an attorney. Don't just listen to what you hear on this show and think, I can go ahead and go into court all on my own. That's not what this is about. You can always contact me at jameslewislegal.com. I have a contact page on the last page of my website. You can email me at james@jameslewislegal.com. You can give me a call at 404-601-0075. And I may be able to help you with your legal issue. If not, I can direct you to an attorney who can help you with your legal issue. If you have an idea for this show, if you have a topic that you'd like to hear us talk about, go ahead and email me, and I will look for an attorney who knows something about your issue and bring them on air, and we'll talk about it. I have attorney Joann Johnston and attorney Gentry Mander from the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center. Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hello.
Yeah, good stuff so far. I mean, it really is. This is really helpful information for people out there. Once again, why don't you give them some contact information for the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center, just in case they listen to this show and they were like me in law school, like, that applies to me.
Yeah. So you can call us at 706-424-7557. And if you have a question or think you might own heirs property, you can leave us a message at extension 1. We'll get back to you within 1 to 2 business days. You can also check out our website, which is www.gahersproperty.org.
Good stuff. So when we last left, you guys said something really interesting, and I had no idea. And I'm just like, I want to know more about that. Rehab programs. What is that all about?
So a rehab program it's usually it's almost always in the context of a home. It's a rehabilitation program. If you have repairs that need to be made, your roof is leaking. If you have weatherization issues, it's drafty, you're paying a lot in electricity, somebody could come in and install new windows or help you with insulation. It's programs that are designed to help you with repairs and weatherization and things to keep your utility bills low. The programs work differently. We're in Atlanta. The city of Atlanta has a number of programs going on right now. Different cities will get funding. Different nonprofit organizations will get funding to do these kinds of services. For folks in rural Georgia, USDA Rural Development has rehab programs. So if you're not in a city, but you qualify through that program, they work differently. Sometimes someone will just come out and do the work for your house. Sometimes you're going to get a loan that's usually forgivable.
A forgivable loan?
Yes, a forgivable loan.
Whoa.
So there are also most, different qualifications. The primary one is income-based. But, if you stay in the house for 10 years or you pass away and one of your children stays in the house after you passed away, so it's a total of usually 10 years, the program will forgive a tenth of the loan every 10 years. Every year. So if you've got a $30,000 loan, the loan is gonna be reduced by $3,000 every year. You don't have to make payments. You just have to be in the house.
Now that is so. Can they find out about these type of programs through you guys? Is that the right place for them to go? I mean, we kind of want to steer people in the right direction. So if someone wants to find out about programs like this, where do they go?
So we're not the right people. Gentry and I work in Atlanta, and so we do work closely with those Atlanta programs. But you want to go online and Google, rehab. It's REHAB programs. In the city of Atlanta, it's Invest Atlanta that's running those programs. Another way to find them is to just identify housing nonprofits that are in your area, or sometimes you can find them. The federal government gives communities money, their community development block grants, so you can Google CDBG for community development block grant and see who has received those funds. And then another option for those in rural Georgia is the USDA Rural Development. And you can just go online and see what they offer.
That is really good stuff. Whenever you start talking free money, my ears perk up instantly, and I know other people are probably like that. So we've talked a lot about heirs property. We've gotten into a lot of stuff, and sometimes it's hard for listeners to listen. So I want to go back through it and kind of define. So just give us a quick definition of what is heirs property.
Heirs property is property, whether that's home or land, that's been passed down generation to generation in such a way that there's multiple people who own it.
Okay, now, so what are the problems with heirs property? What does it prevent you from doing?
So
I just want to hammer that home. Why people need to pay attention to this?
So it's difficult or impossible sometimes to sell or mortgage the property without the agreement of everybody. You may not be eligible for loss mitigation programs if the property is facing foreclosure. You may not be eligible for homestead exemptions. It depends on how the county interprets the law. You may not be able to qualify for these rehab programs like we're talking about. You are facing an increased risk of forced sale. So maybe you're an owner, but the person who's living there hasn't been paying the taxes, and so it goes up to a tax sale that you're not even aware of because you're not getting the notices.
Wow, wait a minute. It can go up for a tax sale? That's something that's really horrible.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah, that's why everyone, even if you don't live there, if you co-own family property, you should check every year to make sure the taxes are being paid.
Very important.
And then one that's really important to me, it's not economic, but it just damages family relationships. It causes a lot of strife and consternation, and sometimes it's irreparable.
Oh, my. That is horrible. So now what can people do? What are the steps to prevent heirs property? Let's go through this again because it's really important.
So one step is, like Joann mentioned, thoughtful estate planning. So that is a last will and testament that gives your home in a way that does not create heirs property. So that's either leaving it to one person, leaving it to two people as joint tenants with right of survivorship, selling the property and dividing the proceeds between the children, giving your children an option to buy one another out. Anything that ends up with one or maybe two owners is best.
And you can also do, as we talked about earlier, the trust either before you pass, or you can set up or instruct your executor to set up a trust through your will, or the limited liability company that we talked about a while back.
Okay. Now that's all really good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center. How does a person qualify for your help?
Okay. So you have to call the intake line at 706-424-7557. There's information on our website about the intake process and what it entails. It's usually a 30-minute phone call with one of our staff members to go over your problem. We can't give you legal advice during that call. We're just getting information. We'll ask you to send us some documents. It's usually the last recorded deed. If you'll go down to the courthouse and find the last recorded deed. It can, if somebody has a will, we'll want to see the will. If somebody's estate has already been probated, we'll want to see those documents. Just depending on your situation, we'll ask for documents that we will review. And based upon our review of those documents, we as a staff collectively decide whether to take cases. We focus and give priority to Fulton and DeKalb County in Atlanta and South and Southwest Georgia. So those cases are the ones that receive priority. We work with low and moderate income folks. So low income folks, it's household size and income. So we are able to take some cases for free. Some folks, especially those in rural Georgia, there's 7 counties in Georgia where there's no attorney that live in that.
There's not a single attorney in the whole entire county.
Some of the counties is just the person who works for the county and the person that works for the bank. So if you have some means and some ability to pay something, we do take clients on a reduced fee basis. It's also based on household size and income and our ability to take the case. So that we can help more people, because, especially in rural, 70% of the attorneys are here in Atlanta.
Now I've heard that before. It's like all the attorneys are here in Atlanta and we're all like battling it out for clients.
Yeah. So especially, talked to someone the other day. She's tried to find an attorney, one turned her down because the one who sent her to us said, this is too complicated. You need to call the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center because I won't take it. So we do help low income folks for free. And then we do reduced fees for moderate income folks.
Is there a particular demographic that falls into this more, or is it across the board?
It affects all communities. It affects all economic levels equally. I think when a lot of people talk about heirs property, they talk about it in connection with African American land loss, but it is not purely a problem for African American families. It is a problem for all families from all income levels.
This has been a great show, guys. Thanks for being on. We're at the end here, so why don't you give them some contact information for you one last time?
Okay. So we're the Georgia Heirs Property Law Center. Our intake line is 706-424-7557, extension 1. And our website is www.ga, as in Georgia, Heirs, Heirs, property.org.
Thanks a lot. It's been a great show. I'd like to once again, reach out and thank my producer, the enigmatic Sam Davis, and my fabulous, intelligent, and creative multimedia producer, Anthony Cook. And thank you guys for being back there and making it all happen, making the magic come to life. You've been listening to Lewis on the Law. I've got another great show for you guys next week. Matthew Kilgo will be on, and we'll talk Georgia gun laws.